Hello, and welcome to One Tech World. Thanks for joining the session. When I was 23, I very nearly lost my life in a car accident. Mine wasn't a particularly major car accident, but the seatbelt that no doubt saved my life also caused a major internal injury that almost ended my life. You see, car seatbelts have been largely designed on male crash test dummies. The lower part of the seatbelt is designed to sit below the hips on a man, but because of our different physiology, it ends up sitting above the hips on a woman. When I had my car accident, the impact caused by the lower part of the seatbelt ruptured my large intestine, and that in turn led to septicemia. The doctor later told me I was days away from losing my life. You see, women are 47% more likely than men to be seriously injured, 17% more likely to die in a car crash. Safety regulations are changing now, slowly, but I can't help but think that had that industry had more women involved in design, in research, in safety testing, in marketing, and importantly, in leadership positions of influence, that someone at some stage would have said, hang on, aren't we missing someone here? Representation matters. Today I'm going to share my thoughts on the key barriers that prevent women from being equally represented in leadership and share some research that might surprise you. I'm Sharon Peake. I'm a chartered occupational psychologist, a gender equity researcher, and I've spent the last 15 years fascinated by why women are underrepresented in leadership roles in business and the structural barriers that get in their way. We all have a responsibility to create a workplace and a society that works for everyone. Today, I'm going to share with you practical actions that you can apply straight away to start to dismantle these barriers for the benefit of the women in your life and also, of course, yourself. 140 years. According to the UN, that's the time it's going to take to achieve gender parity at managerial level around the world at the current very slow pace of change. That's about 4 or even 5 generations. And that means that even the baby girl in this photo won't experience gender equality in leadership in her lifetime unless we speed things up. When it comes to STEM around the world, women account for about 1/3 of STEM graduates, 1/4 of the STEM workforce, but just over 1/10 of STEM C-suite executive roles. So I'm sure you're wondering, well, what are the real reasons for this disparity? How do we address them? What do we do? Today, I'll do a deep dive into 4 issues, the 4 Ds, and how to address them. By the way, many of the barriers I'm going to talk about today also apply to other minoritized genders, such as non-binary and trans individuals. And as you'll see, these barriers are not experienced equally by all women. Some women experience the barriers much more harshly. So let's start with the first of the 4 Ds, the double burden. So this is the dual workload of paid and unpaid work, which falls disproportionately to women. On average, in Europe and North America, women spend almost 4 hours a day on unpaid care and domestic work, whereas men spend just over 2 hours a day. On average, women spend 1.8 times the amount of time on domestic responsibilities as men. So let's just think about that for a moment. The average times, if women have 4 hours of domestic work each day that they're attending to and work full-time, the average full-time job is an 8-hour day, that's 12 hours gone already. Now, add on to that a commute if you're not working remotely, and so now you're up to about 14 hours of your day. And of course, as you increase in seniority, typically your hours increase. So maybe we're up to 16 or even 18 hours a day between paid and unpaid work. And that's before you get to sleep or exercise or do hobbies or social recreational activities, the things that are important for our physical and mental well-being. So you can see how pretty quickly it gets too much. And this results in some women working beneath their potential and not putting themselves forward for leadership roles, as it's just too much to juggle. Now, by the way, it's really important to note here that this is very much a heterosexual issue. The research suggests that same-sex couples have a much more equitable distribution of domestic responsibilities than heterosexual couples do. So what can you do about all of this? Well, if you're in a relationship, an enlightening activity can be to do an audit of the hours that you and your partner spend on domestic responsibilities and see how evenly balanced it is and whether that division of responsibilities works for your family situation. And in the workplace, one of the most powerful things you can do is to consider the impact of your decisions on people's personal lives. I recall one client sharing with me how she had struggled after her manager insisted on an early morning meeting on a Monday at the office each week. It created an issue with her dropping her son to childcare, so she asked that the meeting could start 15 minutes later so she could do the nursery drop-off and then get to the office, or if she could simply dial in. But her request was declined. As a result, she had to find an additional childcare arrangement, which ended up costing an extra £75 for each of those weekly meetings, all because her manager wouldn't move her meeting by 15 minutes. So don't be that person, whether you're a leader or not. Be mindful of your colleagues' commitments outside of work and try to accommodate them. Now let's turn to the second of the 4Ds, the double bind. This is a likability competence trade-off that forces women to walk a fine line between being taken seriously and being socially accepted. It's a systemic bias where behaviours that are praised in male leaders, things like assertiveness, ambition, confidence, are criticised in women. Now, this phenomenon has been studied extensively, and the findings are always the same. For men, success and likability are positively correlated, but for women, they're negatively correlated. The more women take charge and are seen as competent, the less they're liked. And this is the kicker. This is by both men and women. Gender stereotypes mean that as a society, we expect men and women to behave in certain ways. We expect to see men in leadership roles, and we expect them to be competent. We expect women to be nurturing and caring. So anytime a woman transgresses these gender stereotypes, say by displaying assertiveness or confidence, she incurs a subtle social penalty. She becomes less likable. And this means women have a very narrow range of acceptable behaviours within which they can operate. Maybe you've been referred to as arrogant for displaying the same confidence a man might display, or political for displaying ambition. Society conditions us to be risk-aware and cautious in our behaviours to avoid this social backlash. And as a result, women are twice as likely as men to worry about how they come across in meetings. In the UK, 54% of women worry about how they are perceived in meetings. Maybe this worries you too. Now, these figures are even higher for some women. Women of colour, women with a disability, lesbian and bisexual women, and perimenopausal women, that is, the years leading up to menopause. These women all experience the double bind more harshly. So, what can you do about this? It's up to all of us to notice and to dismantle these outdated assumptions. One of the most powerful things you can do is to notice where we might find ourselves falling into these traps. Do we ever judge a woman differently to a man for displaying confidence or ambition or decisiveness? None of us are immune from our social conditioning. We need to notice it ourselves first and then call it out. And we can start to reshape societal expectations of how women are meant to behave by following our own voice. What the world needs now more than ever are different styles of leadership. So rather than imitating the leadership styles of the men around you, find a style that reflects your personality. For this to work, we do need the support of others, and we're going to come to that a bit later. Let's turn now to the third of the 4Ds, discrimination and everyday sexism. This includes sexual harassment on one end of the scale, as well as the more subtle but still very damaging microaggressions on the other end of the scale. Now, microaggressions, if you haven't heard of them before, are the subtle, often unintentional behaviours that are discriminatory, but in isolation may feel a little petty to criticise. They include things like being interrupted or talked over, having your comments dismissed, being on the receiving end of a poor taste joke, having someone else receive credit for your idea, or being mistaken for someone more junior. A survey by Deloitte of 5,000 women from 10 countries found that almost a third of all women have experienced microaggressions in the workplace in the last 12 months. And here we can see the impact of intersectionality on women's experiences. Intersectionality is where different social identities intersect to form different combinations of discrimination and also privilege. So you can see in this table that women don't have the same experience. The prevalence of microaggressions rises dramatically for those women from underrepresented ethnicities, those with a disability, and those in the LGBT plus community. Similarly, sexual harassment occurs more often for those in the LGBT plus community and those with a disability. We know from our own research at Shape Talent that trans women experience some of the worst harassment and discrimination of all women. Our own research has found that a third of women often feel inadequate at work. Think about that. 1 in 3 women don't feel they're able to perform at their best. Microaggressions undermine women's confidence. So, what can you do about this? Well, one of the most powerful things we can do is to name microaggressions and harassment when they occur, particularly when we see it happening to someone else. Allyship here is really critical. And while it may be challenging, you can and you should also consider calling this out when you are on the receiving end yourself. So a simple model for doing this is the call in, call on, call out model. So you can call the person into the discussion. You can say to them, what do you mean by that exactly? It's a non-threatening way of gently helping to raise their awareness of what they've just said. You can call on another person. You can say, not sure about that. What do you think about that comment, Michael? Bring someone else into the conversation. Or you can call out their behaviour. You can say, that's not acceptable in the workplace. And you can also report it to your line leader, to HR, or if your organisation has one, to a compliance hotline. Now, obviously, different levels of severity will call for different reactions, and you'll need to exercise judgment depending on the severity of the situation and how safe you feel in the moment. There can be consequences for speaking up, just as there can be consequences for staying silent. Whatever your approach, it doesn't need to be confrontational. I can recall very clearly 10 years ago when I was presenting to the group CEO and his executive committee. I was the most junior person in the room and I was presenting. And as I was, one of the executive team cut me off mid-sentence. Now my boss, who was also in the meeting, very calmly and gently held up his hand and said, actually, Sharon hadn't finished speaking. I'd really like to hear what else she has to say. This is a very simple but very powerful act of advocacy, and it changed the whole dynamic of the meeting. I wasn't interrupted again, either in that meeting or in future meetings in that forum. Now you can do the same thing for others. Okay, now let's get to the last of the 4 Ds, the development gap. Here we see that women don't get the same level of career support as men. So what are these development gaps? Well, for starters, men are much more likely to receive sponsorship. What is sponsorship? Sponsorship is an act of advocacy and visibility raising. Sponsors help you with advancement. They're in positions of power and they use their power to help you. And I don't mean in terms of nepotism or undue favoritism, but typically by helping to raise your visibility, which becomes increasingly critical for promotion into senior roles. And this is different from mentoring, where a mentor is someone who shares their knowledge. A sponsor is someone who will use their power to help you. With a senior sponsor, women are just as likely as men to get promoted. But here's the kicker. Men, at least in senior roles, are 50% more likely than women to have a sponsor. And that's actually one of the reasons that we, as a standard in our women's development programs as Shape Talent, we allocate a sponsor to every program participant. Now, the reason for this sponsorship gap is partly to do with how we network. We know that women don't get access to the same powerful networks that men do, which in turn means they know fewer senior leaders who might sponsor them. And this can lead to women receiving fewer stretch assignments. These are the critical experiences, the high-profile assignments that are often the building blocks of career progression. We also know that women get less helpful development feedback. Numerous studies have found that women receive more vague, more personal, and less helpful feedback than men. Why does this matter? Well, people who receive constructive, actionable feedback progress faster in their careers. So, what can you do about this? Well, you can start by identifying the critical experiences you need to progress your career. They're usually not written down anywhere, so you're going to need to go out and talk to people and figure out what they are. Talk to current job incumbents, talk to HR, talk to your line manager, but find out what they are and create a plan to get them. Maybe it's international experience. Maybe it's successfully leading a cross-functional project. Maybe it's taking a new product to market. Maybe it's simply showing that you can be trusted to solve an important problem. Figure out what those experiences are and get them. Now, this often means putting your hand up for opportunities before you feel 100% ready. Now, trust me here, I've worked in HR for the best part of my career, and I know, despite what people tell you, no one is ever 100% ready for that promotion. So don't let that get in the way. Now, you should also build a support crew around you. Get a sponsor, get a mentor, get a coach, preferably get all three. A sponsor should be someone in a senior position in your business. Ideally, 2 levels above you is helpful so that they're at a level that they can influence your promotion. Leverage their connections thoughtfully to grow your network and make sure you build trusted relationships so that you can get honest feedback about what you can do to progress. Now, on that note, as we come to an end, I want to remind you of the actions that I've shared that you can take starting today. So this is all about building your career. So first of all, build a support crew, get a sponsor, get a mentor, get a coach, get all 3 if you can. Invest in yourself. Invest in yourself as if you're investing in a business. Are you taking your development seriously? Go undertake critical job assignments, get those high profile stretch projects. These things help you to be seen and help you to build a positive reputation. And put your hand up before you feel 100% ready. Don't wait until you meet all of the criteria. Leverage your network. Build and use your network well. Make sure you have a range of people who can help you. Make sure they can help you in 3 areas: operationally, strategically, but also with your professional development. And then at home, look at how you divide unpaid work in the household and make sure that's fair. Examine how the domestic responsibilities are shared at home and just ensure that division is equitable for your family setup. So these are things that you can be doing straight away. There's no time like the present. Now, if you're interested in reading more about our research, you can download some of our white papers, which you'll see a QR code for on screen. Thank you very much for your time today and enjoy the rest of your day.